Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Noethling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will empower you to become that confident leader and take your business and your life to the next level. Today, I am excited to have Kerry Barrett as my guest. Let me tell you a little bit about Kerry. She is an on-camera coach, corporate trainer, and keynote speaker on a mission to help you level up your on-camera skills and confidence so you can leverage video for your authority, visibility, and revenue. She is the founder of the VIQ Academy and the founder of MVP Your VIQ training framework. After overcoming a debilitating fear of public speaking, she now uses her 20 years of experience in the TV industry to help clients break through mindset issues and cultivate a persona that exudes confidence and authenticity, whether she's on camera or standing on stage or giving a presentation. So today we're going to talk about that. The topic is level up your on-camera performance. Please join me in welcoming Kerry Barrett. Kerry, so happy to have you.
And it's lovely to be here, Vicki. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. As I mentioned before we got started, you and I teach and coach the same thing. As I retired from UPS and 40 years of working in corporate. And then the pandemic hit, I saw such a need for people to be more comfortable speaking, not only in person, but really being able to do this online game in a way that makes people forget that they're talking to someone through a little red dot,
Yeah.
So I think it's an important skill for us to do. And I'm so excited to have your extensive experience in television to really enhance some of the things that the audience may need to know to be that top performer. So we always start with the easy questions. 2 questions. First is, where do you call home? Where do you live?
That is New Jersey. So I'm about an hour outside of New York City. When I worked in the news industry, I worked all over the country, but most recently in New York City.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And then we gave a brief bit. I mean, your bio was much longer. I shortened it a little bit so that you could just share your story about your journey that took you maybe from that college student thinking, well, we could probably start a little sooner whenever you were that terrified high schooler to what led you to a career and a college degree in something that I guess that's really facing your fears. So talk about your journey and led you to where you are today.
Of course, my pleasure. Yeah, my fear does go predates high school by a long shot, actually. I started really having this fear, I think, when I was in elementary school. And it probably, I know it stems from a bunch of different things, but that's when I really noticed it kicking in as we had to start doing, book reports in front of class. And as we, whether it was a group or whether it was an individual, I always found that I was, no kidding, like back of the room, breathing into a paper bag sort of situation. It wasn't a rational, I'm scared, which I think we all feel for the most part when we're up on a stage in front of a lens. It went far beyond that. So I actually wanted to become a veterinarian. My whole goal had always been that I was going to work with animals because it meant I didn't think anyway, I'd have to talk to people quite as much.
That's right. Animals, they love you.
Yeah. Organic chemistry put a fairly decisive and quick end to that. I was in my sophomore year of college, and organic chem was like, I think we found the one thing that you hate more than public speaking. And so I took a year and a half off. I still honestly had no idea what it was that I wanted to do, but I saw my friends graduating around me and I figured, okay, I got to do something. So I re-enrolled in a communications program, which at my school was very science-based. I went to Clemson for an undergraduate degree, very
Awesome.
science-based. Their communications department was new and it was very broad. So it had, everything from speech pathology to business and international business and language to journalism, a little bit of PR and marketing. And I thought, okay, well, surely I can find something with which I can, use to make a living in this broad range of possibilities. A, B, no organic chemistry, and C, well, maybe I can finally sort of get my arms around this fear that I have of speaking, because I was going to have to take 2 public speaking courses. And in the process of re-enrolling, trying to make up for that year and a half of lost time that I took off, I was jamming my schedule full of credits. So 12 was the, full-time load. I was looking to take 27 and I had 24 credits and I wanted to figure out how I could jam another 3 in there. And I was busy Monday through Friday. So I figured I'd get an internship. And one of the best internships to get for somebody that has a crazy schedule already is an internship in the news business, because it functions 24/7, 365. I could intern on the weekends, I could intern overnight, I could intern early in the morning. And so I got an internship at a local TV station, WYFF, which is the NBC affiliate in Greenville, Spartanburg, South Carolina. And I loved it from day one. So then I had to learn how I was going to overcome that fear and get not just, better at it, but good enough that somebody would pay for me to do it. And that began the process of putting into place what I use now, the framework and the methods that I use to train clients for media opportunities, public speaking engagements, virtual presentations or video communication, and for PR, for media opportunities for their business or their personal brand.
It's interesting, how sometimes we take that side road and it changes our life completely. Never expecting it. But, and I think for those that are listening, I didn't go to college until I was 46. And because I have a large family and they couldn't afford to send me to. So I took on things and challenges because I was trying to compete with all those people my coworkers that did have degrees. And then at 50, college was so easy and so because I had almost 18 years of experience. Oh no, gosh, 20 some years of experience at that point, that all of the things that I did, and I was on the road the whole time. But so whenever kids say, well, I don't know what I want to do, I said, doesn't make much difference.
It really doesn't.
Because you're going to change your mind anyway as you get in there, just as you did.
It's very, very true. I had always planned on being a veterinarian. I mean, there was never any sort of, well, what if that doesn't work? Or what if you don't really like it? I had, since I was a little thing, had decided I was going to be a veterinarian. So you're 100% right. I don't think I know anybody who hasn't changed their major at least once at some point.
Yeah. But anything that you do, you have to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad I'm glad I had I think, understanding that despite how terrified I was of it, it was something that I was going to have to learn at some point. I didn't ever anticipate getting really great at it. That was never the goal. But as it turns out, I'm actually kind of okay at it. And I think because I understood that also to some degree, there really is, it's different than, let's say, an organic chemistry where A plus B, taken by the square root of X equals some other jumble of numbers and letters. There's an equation where something is right or wrong. With speaking, and when I say speaking, I mean anytime you're in front of the lens or anytime that you're on a stage, really it is so subjective. That makes it scary in one sense, but it also means that you have such broad leeway to create your own self and create something that's very personal. And it doesn't mean that you have to tick all the boxes of technical perfection. It just means that you have to understand how to communicate well and be authentic with it. And at the end of the day, authenticity, which is a word that's been thrown around, we hardly know what it means anymore. Really, it just means that you have the skills and the confidence to be yourself, not afraid of being a solo performer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what makes you unique as a coach? As I was going through your website, and there are some things that you bring to the table that I don't have. And again, we do the same thing. So what makes you unique?
Yeah. And there are things that you bring to the table that I don't have. The thing that makes me unique is that I overcame this debilitating fear, number one. So I understand, not just academically or intellectually, I understand what that fear is. And one of the things that I do is I work with my clients to figure out where it stems from. I'm not a therapist, but oftentimes understanding it only takes one bad scenario or one bad situation for our brain to create all sorts of stories about how to keep us safe. So part of it is understanding where that comes, and then reverse engineering where they want to get with where they are to create a bespoke curriculum, if you will, to move them from point A to point B and beyond. Right. And then the second element that makes me unique is that I have 20 plus years of experience as a network news anchor. I have a couple of Emmy Awards under my belt for my on-camera experience, some Telly Awards, a Murrow, some other stuff that I won't bore the audience with, but I have not just the academic knowledge that I received through my schooling and through, of course, formal coaching and consulting when I was in the news business, but also 20 years of practical experience, how to create the playbooks, how to be, if you're interested in media opportunities, how to be a great guest, how to energetically support your host, how to answer in sound bites. So a lot of what I work with my clients on as well, depending on their goals, is media opportunities, media training.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you just said was that that you teach them how to be good guests. And I think sometimes as and I've interviewed 500 people so far in the last 2 years, and some people know their subject, but have such a difficult time knowing how much to give and how to really have a conversation. And then that makes them non-engaging, and they think I'm just so intelligent. But the thing is, your audience needs to breathe. Your audience needs to think and absorb. And so what are some practical tips or strategies that you have for being more engaging?
Yeah, it makes such a good point, because when somebody is in that space where they're not sure how to share their story or what their story is or how much time they should take to share it, then they're in their heads. And unless they're very skilled at being able to sort of bring this one narrative back in line with what you should be doing, then it very often can just begin to spiral. In terms of being an engaging guest, it depends a little bit on the format in which you're speaking. So for example, if you're on a podcast, such as the one that we're recording now, and you have anywhere between 30 and 60 minutes, well, you have a lot more time for back and forth with the host. The host can ask follow-up questions. They can ask clarifying questions. You have a chance to share your story in a little bit more detail. I was on NBC News a couple of weeks ago, and my entire segment was 2 minutes and 37 seconds. I'm sharing the same information, but in a drastically reduced kind of way. Each one of my answers has to be 15 to 30 seconds tops. So I like to talk to my clients, or help my clients understand how to tell their stories in what I call an accordion style, meaning you have this basic foundation of a story, and then you're almost adding or pulling out modules, if you will, so that you can tell that one story in 10 seconds, and you can also tell it in 3 or 4 minutes. And so that's one of the key ways. And then understanding that you need to be able to read your host as well. So You are there to help the host carry the show. You're
Right.
not there for the host to have to drag you over the finish line, kicking and screaming and sweating by the end of the show. So recognizing that you're there to support them as well is a huge, and I think that's a little bit of a mindset shift for most people who are not used to doing media, or who maybe are just beginning to dip their toe into the podcast waters as well.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things that I've noticed as I have been a guest, sometimes the host doesn't really give you time to share your story, that they have a lot of their own stories.
Yeah.
And the time, is really for you as the guest to shine. So how would you coach that host to be more engaging?
Yeah. Well, really, it takes practice. And I know that I wish that there was some magic wand that I could say, with do this thing, and suddenly you'll be a great guest, or you'll be a great host. And from doing, I think you said 500 or more of these so far, that each time you feel like you learn a little bit more about how to understand a guest, or as a guest, how to understand a host. If you are hosting and you are new to it, one of the things that I like to do, especially if you have a guest that's a little bit nervous, is just set the agenda ahead of time. And for a lot of people, for many people, it's difficult to do this in a way that's non-linear. I work with a lot of people in finance and insurance, and they tend to think very linearly, because how I speak for a living. That's how they work with their clients. And so I like to set the agenda ahead of time as the host and say, especially if I have a nervous guest, listen, my goal here is to make you shine. If I notice that we're veering down a path that is not exactly where we need to go, or I feel like we're getting off on a tangent, I'm just going to jump in. So be ready for me to potentially interrupt you. It's not because I'm being rude or because I'm trying to dismiss you. It's just because I want to redirect the conversation so that we can make sure that you are shining and the audience is getting as much out of this interview as possible. And that way you've prepped the guest to be ready for you to jump in. They're not going to mistake it for something as rude or interrupting them. And they know that you're doing your best as the host to help make sure, again, that they shine and that the audience is getting what they need out of it. So that would be one of my best tips or one of my easiest tips is to set the agenda for that interview before the interview even starts.
Perfect. So what are the top 10 things that you recommend not doing when you're public speaking?
Top 10. Oh my gosh. That's all right. I'm going to have to make a list to make sure that I don't duplicate or go over or under. All right. Top 10 things that I suggest not doing when you're public speaking.
And it doesn't have to be in the order of importance, just off the top of your mouth.
In any order.
Any order.
Number one, don't get in your head so much about saying or ah. And the reason I say that is if you are using those non-filler words to the point of distraction, then absolutely you need to come up with a plan for eliminating or reducing them. But saying a few ums or ahs, in my opinion, and there's some who disagree with me, is not a deal breaker. I've never heard anybody say, oh my gosh, that speaker was so great. They were life-changing. I'm going to remember everything that they said, because they didn't use or ah once. I've never, ever heard anybody say that. And I don't think that I ever will. That's not key. That's technical execution, and it's important, but it's not key. Number two, one of the other top 10 no-nos is to stand behind the podium with a white knuckle grip. You know the one where it's the podium is shaking and the wood is creaking because they've got a death grip on the thing.
I usually push it away.
Yeah. I understand the need for it. It's because it's less vulnerable standing behind something. We're not being judged head to toe, aside from just, it's nice to have a place to put our notes and put a glass of water or whatever it is that we need. But standing behind that thing with a death grip is really the equivalent of having a wall up in front of your audience. I was just emceeing an event last night, and they only had a podium mic, which means I had to stay by the podium. But in an ideal world, every now and then you venture out and you use the stage.
Yeah.
So that's number 2. And then let's tag on to that with number 3, using the stage. Recognize that the stage, and they're different, whether you're on a physical stage or whether you're on a camera, there is an opportunity to use a literal or a virtual stage as part of your journey, as part of your storytelling. So use that stage in a way that allows you to almost play a character in your speech, which brings me to number 4. And this really isn't a top 10 no, this is a top 10 do. I don't know. That's
must do.
That's it. That's the word I was looking for. A must do. Instead of doing a lot of telling, do as much showing if you can.
Yeah.
So for example, in the news industry, we use an expression that says show, don't tell. We have the ability to use video, at least in the broadcast news industry, but you as the character in this presentation or speech or media opportunity, you have the opportunity to show, not tell as well, meaning you have the opportunity to create dialogue or reenact dialogue, which is a next level skill set. It seems very simple, but it's not often to relay that dialogue in a way that sounds conversational and mimics the way that it actually took place. So create a character and use the stage to be able to tell your story or deliver that speech or presentation or whatever it is in a more compelling way. Number 5, top 10 no-nos. I'm going to talk about being in front of the camera. I generally do not suggest wearing white or black or anything with small patterns. Small patterns can dance and moray. If you're wearing a fitted shirt that has a small pattern, things can get stretched and look odd on a camera lens. Yeah. The angle thing is actually legit. Things don't always look real the way that they are or as they are on camera, as they are in real life.
Right.
Black and white, unless you really know your lighting and your environment and your background, black or white will always make a bad lighting situation worse. So like, for example, the top that you're wearing, I love that color and it's pretty and interesting, but not distracting. And it has a little bit of contrast to the background behind you. So it's a really nice color to be wearing on camera. Let's see, what is that? Is that number 6? Number 7. Top 10 no-no is being energetically flat when you're on camera. So the camera does all sorts of things to energy, none of them good. It energetically flattens us in a couple of ways. Number 1, you've got the hardware and the software, meaning you've got the mic and you've got the camera and you've got the internet connection and any other host of issues that could go wrong with the hardware and the software. Then you have the fact that there's no context outside of this little box. And then you also have the fact that you've taken someone who is 3D and you've made them 2D, all of which serve to sort of energetically flatten your delivery. And this is probably hands down the biggest mistake that I see people make, is that they're not energetic when they're speaking on camera. So a quick little analogy. Imagine you are at dinner at a crowded, noisy restaurant, and you're at a long table of 8 people, and you're on one side at one end, and the person to whom you're trying to speak is on the other side at the other end. What are some of the things that you would do to make sure that they understand what you're saying? You'd probably lean in if there was something exciting. You'd maybe amplify your facial expressions a little bit. You would perhaps use hand gestures. Conceptually, the way that you speak on camera is very similar. There are certainly nuances. You don't want to, what works on social media might not work in the more intimate format. Podcast could look a little bit bombastic, if you will, but generally speaking, that's how it should work. Think about that, the way that you'd communicate there, and then try and replicate it. For most people, it's a significant increase in energy.
Awesome.
All right.
Number
Number nine. See, there I am using my ums again.
That's all right, but it's only occasional.
That's very good. Thank you. Now that I'm thinking about it, though, it'll probably
I know, of course.
every other word. Energetically flattening. I think the next thing is eye contact.
Yeah.
This is a fairly simple one, but it's still difficult for people. And the only reason that I can do it all right is because I spent 20 years talking
looking
for
at
a
the
living.
camera.
I understand how to do it, and it doesn't seem weird to me.
Yeah.
But when you are, now this doesn't apply to a virtual happy hour that you're having with your buddies on Zoom or whatever, but when you're, for example, doing a podcast, remember the end user, and the end user is neither yourself nor is it the host. It's the person who is going to be watching this video podcast. And so think of them, and their eyes are your camera's lens. And so if you want to look that person in the eye, and I say that person, even though there could be a million people there, look that person in the eye by looking into the lens, and you will not go wrong. And then finally, number 10, the biggest no-no that I see people make on the regular, I'm trying to think of one more that is a big deal. I would say that it's long preambles when they're creating video for LinkedIn, meaning, or really any social media. I don't need you to tell me who you are. This isn't your elevator pitch. You're not going around at a BNI and saying, hi, Joe, blah, 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 blah. I'm Joe from blah, 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 blah. Remember that if somebody's interested in what you're saying and they're on LinkedIn or any social media profile or feed for that matter, all they have to do is go to your profile. Have your profile set correctly, then they'll find every single thing that they need to know. You should be spitting value at whoever is watching as soon as they hit the arrow, or as soon as your video scrolls up in their feed.
And that kind of goes along with my next question is, being able to establish your credibility and the authority. So you use blogging. And I know in my app, I have blogs, but I don't really have them on my podcast website. But talk about how you use blogging to really establish that authority and credibility.
I use blogs. I publish about one a week. They go up on my website. I also transcribe and take email newsletters and social media and my podcast. And I turn all of them into various versions of blogs as well. But it's one of the easiest ways to generate traffic to your website and to establish, because it's longer form content, to establish trust with whomever is reading or watching. There's about 50, I guess it's about 50 blog sites or websites that accept guest blogs. And I actually have them up on the resources section of my website. But what I like to do is I write a blog and then I'll send it to a syndicate, which is Greatest is the one that I use, GREATIST. And they will repost that blog, or they'll submit that blog to the websites or the blog sites that you indicate are of interest to you. So it could be, Mind Body Green or Refinery 29 or Forbes, although Forbes is hard to get into if you're not pay to play. But and then I have my content in all of these additional sites, which is a great way to broaden my audience and bring them to my funnel. Blogging and vlogging are key.
Awesome. So to wrap things up now, what's next for Kerry Barrett in this journey that you have?
Oh gosh. Well, I have 3 kids. The youngest is 7, the oldest is 13. We just finished school yesterday as of this recording for summer break. So my mind is focused on what's next for me is probably not a very pretty 10 weeks of summer vacation. What is really coming up next for me as a business owner is I'm getting ready to launch a new program that teaches founders, entrepreneurs, executives, but for the most part, this is a business owner focused program. It teaches media training and publicity coaching. So how to create relationships within the media, how to discover what your stories are, how to craft a pitch for the media, how to generate your own PR without having to pay $3,500 a month or more for a PR agency. Right. So that is just now beginning to make its way out into the world, and that is the next offer that I'm really looking forward to serving people with.
That sounds awesome.
Thank you.
So it is time now for me to share the slide of contact information. If you are just listening, again, I remind you every time, but go grab a paper and pencil. You should have been taking notes all along. She gave such great information for you, but go ahead and get that paper and pencil so you can capture her website information and get to those resources. Her website is kerrybarrett.com. That's KerryBarrett.com. Facebook is I am Kerry Barrett. LinkedIn is Kerry Barrett. Instagram is I am Kerry Barrett. Twitter is I am Kerry Barrett. And TikTok is at I am Kerry Barrett. And YouTube is at I am Kerry Barrett. I'm going to let Kerry Barrett talk to you about what you can find on that website and what social media she really spends the most time in, so you can have the most opportunity to connect.
I really appreciate that, Vicki. Thank you. Yeah, I spend most of my time on LinkedIn, although I just recently relaunched, my Instagram and YouTube. So I post different sorts of content there. I post all my vlogs there as well, and my podcasts also. So I'd love a follow. I'm happy to follow back on any of those social media feeds. And if you go to my website, kerrybarrett.com/resources, you'll find all of my free tools, my downloads. I mentioned the list of 50 guest posting sites that you can use to help generate media for your business or your personal brand. You can book free strategy calls there. So really, kerrybarrett.com/resources is the place where you can go to find all of it.
Awesome. So Kerry, it's just been wonderful chatting with you. We are so aligned. We talked a little bit about the fact that it's really, we spend so much time trying to have the perfect pitch, the perfect presentation, and get all our information out there, but it really is just a conversation that makes it the best, and the magic happens. So I'm so happy we had this wonderful conversation today. And thank you for being a great guest.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
And as always, I remind everyone that life is a journey, and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Noethling, signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.